All right, greetings everyone. We've got our room filling up here very quickly as folks will be joining us today, but we're glad to have you here as part of our ongoing webinar series. This is Ken Phelps from the Daytona Regional Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to our webinar on the CARES Act, Major Provisions, Implementation, and Resources. And this session is presented by the Volusia County Chamber Alliance. These trying times of trying to endure the COVID-19 outbreak, there is strength in partnership and community. And that is why this session and the one tomorrow on April 14th are presented and hosted by the Volusia County Chamber Alliance, because we are really all in this together. A couple of housekeeping items for you. If they are not already, please mute your microphones. This will minimize the background noise and ensure that everybody can hear clearly, because this information is very important. If you have a question or a comment at any point during the presentation, please use the chat function. We'll be monitoring that, and then we will get to as many questions as we can with more in the allotted time. If you happen to miss something, if you come in late, we'll be recording the session and we'll have it available as soon as the video is downloaded and converted. And then that will be found on the Daytona Regional Chamber's COVID-19 resource page, as well as our YouTube channel. So with that said, let's welcome our presenter for today's webinar. Hallmark is Vice President of Regional Affairs and Advocacy for the United States Chamber of Commerce, and he's a great friend of the Chamber here throughout Volusia County, and we are very thankful that he's able to join us today and share his time, talent, and expertise. So with more, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ken, and I'm a little leery. You just said time, talents, and expertise. I'm not sure I have any of those, but but no, I appreciate it. But friend, yes, the Chamber there has, with Nancy and Jim, I've had the pleasure of knowing them for many years, 17 years, as long as I've been in the Chamber now. And so I've always enjoyed any opportunity to work with you guys, to come down to Daytona Beach and that whole Volusia County area. Great Chamber friends and partners of ours. And so we couldn't be more pleased and happy to work with you guys and call you friends and partners on just about everything that we do. And I do appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to join you today. I appreciate Ken and you and Nancy, and as I said, Jim before, and the other chambers who are on. Thank you for the leadership you're providing in your communities and to your businesses. This is a trying time, a difficult time, but a time in which I think in the end we'll draw closer, stronger, and we'll come out and we'll be stronger and better for all of us when we can. And we at the U.S. Chamber, and I'll talk about that at the end, already kind of looking to what's next. And we will be doing another series of webinars like this one on talking about kind of a path forward and what that looks like as businesses start reopening, and what are things that businesses need to prepare for in advance and plan for, is another series we're going to be starting to roll out here real soon. But for today's sake, I'm going to talk about the CARES Act. And there's been a lot of information. These briefings have gone from 2 weeks ago to being here's what the legislation says. I'll still do that. A little bit of what the intent from our efforts and work, as far as work with the members of Congress, the intent of the legislation, but it has long gone to the regulatory agencies, the Treasury and the SBA and the Federal Reserve, and so some things are a little bit different than maybe what was intended, but still very important for people to know and to recognize as they start working with their lenders and the SBA on these loans and stuff. But as you recall, they're in a very Congress-like manner. They erased and passed three very important bills in 3 weeks' time. First, there was the $8 billion bill that was mostly funding for research and healthcare needs at the CDC and National Institute for Health and FDA on making sure the hospitals had some of the equipment they needed and test kits. The second bill was the Families First bill that was signed on March the 18th. And that one was largely set up for funding of COVID-19 test kits programs, funding of mandates for states and employers, for unemployment programs and paid leave benefits. And then the bill that we'll talk about now is the CARES Act. And this is the one that was most important for the business community. It's more than a $2 trillion package. With really the potential of being, and Ken, if you want to go ahead and flip the next screen, thank you. And I'm gonna do that, y'all. So I hope there's no mess up on my end, but it's a $2 trillion package with the potential of an additional $4 trillion based upon recommendations by the Federal Reserve and Treasury. This bill is focused on supporting employers, local governments, small businesses, nonprofits, and individual taxpayers. This is the intent of this bill was largely set up to be to try to secure funds so that it could make the difference in a business's efforts to remain open, keep running in the coming weeks, try to reduce their reduction of salary and or personnel, or shut their doors entirely. This legislation does have the automatic payments for individual taxpayers. You've heard that for individuals who file as a single filer on their taxes, making $75,000 or less, will receive a $1,200 check or automatic deposit in their checking account from the IRS. And for joint filers who make $150,000 jointly and file jointly, or less than $150,000, will receive a check for $2,400 plus an additional $500 per child in the house. I think those checks are starting to roll out this week. So some folks may start recognizing those in their accounts or mailboxes later this week. This also expanded and the unemployment benefits. It was really large, phase 2, but this just kind of modified them a bit. Most restrictions on eligibility is suspended if it's related to the COVID-19, and individuals must provide certification that he or she are able and available to work, but are unable to do so because of a number of reasons. Obviously, if they're sick with the virus, or are showing symptoms, or have been advised by medical personnel to stay home, then they qualify for unemployment insurance. If there's someone in their household who is sick with a virus and they're taking care of them, they're eligible. If the school that their children or the daycare that their children go to has shut down because of it, they're eligible for it. If their workplace has been shut down because of it, they're eligible. So it has expanded the eligibility for the uninsurance in this case. It provides an additional $600 per worker per week, and it expands unemployment or extends it by 13 weeks, running from January the 17th through December the 31st. But these additional payments, by the way, and I've heard other people say this really makes it, a lot of people may not want to come back to work. These do sunset on July the 31st, so it doesn't go beyond that time period. Again, eligibility ends when the individual can return to work or they're asked to come back to their job again. And the benefits are run through their state's unemployment insurance offices, not through the federal government. Ken, if you'll flip. The package, the CARES Act has something in it for really all employers. Some tax provisions, the employee retention credit. I'll mention those briefly in a minute, as well as benefits for the large employers. But where I'll spend the most of my time, and this is kind of where it's, I think, the most important for most small businesses, is how they're going to benefit from this. And it's through the Paycheck Protection Program, the EIDL program through the SBA, and then paid sick and family medical leave. Ken, with regards to all employers, as I mentioned a moment ago, the businesses and self-employed individuals can delay their payroll taxes payments or payroll tax payments. These payments are the ones that employers pay on each employee, their Social Security tax, which is about 6.2%, if I recall correctly, for the year of 2020. They can defer this up to 2 years, but 50% of it has to be paid back at the end of 2021, and the remaining 50% has to be paid back by the end of 2022. It's important to remember, though, if you're an employer and you do qualify and get a paycheck protection loan, you are not allowed to, this does not apply to you. You're not able to delay that payroll taxes. If you have businesses that have net operating losses in the years of 2018, 19, and 20, You can carry those losses over or back 5 years. It also extends to pay through businesses or pass through businesses and sole proprietors. It also accelerates recovery of the alternative minimum tax credits for some businesses, and it increases the limit on business interest to 50% from 30% just for the years 2019 and 2020. These are all provisions that were put in the bill so that businesses would have more liquidity so that they could hopefully keep their employees working, keep their doors open, pay their utility bills, pay their rent, and so forth. This was all to try to free up more money for them in this short term. Ken? There's also the employee retention credit. Private employers, including nonprofits, are eligible for the employee retention credit if your business operations were either A, fully or partially suspended due to the COVID-19 shutdown, or a decline in gross receipts by more than 50% in a quarter compared to the same quarter a year ago. So for example, I guess you could take the first quarter this year, maybe the second quarter, which we're in now, and compare that quarter to last year's same quarter. And if your gross receipts drop by more than 50%, you would be eligible for this tax retention credit. Eligible businesses can get a refundable 50% tax credit on the first $100,000 of compensation, including employer portion of health benefits. However, compensation does not include paid sick or family leave for these eligible workers. And how you calculate the eligible workers or who's qualified or counted as eligible workers towards this. Employers with more than 100 employees, full-time employees who are paid but aren't providing services are counted towards eligibility. And for employers with fewer than 100 employees, all employees, regardless of whether or not they're providing services or not, count towards eligibility. The credit only applies to wages paid after March the 12th and before January the 1st of 2021. And employers are not eligible if they, again, similar a moment ago, they are not eligible if they receive a Paycheck protection loan. Now, go ahead and flip again, Ken. Thank you. For the mid-size and larger companies, the Federal Reserve has created Main Street Lenders facilities. This is actually going through the regulatory process now, but these lending facilities will help provide loans to businesses with more than 500 employees and up to about 1,500 employees, or actually even more than that, for them to provide some assistance. It also provides special programs for the airline industry and air carriers and the national security companies who help provide national security for our country. There was $25 billion set aside or appropriated for the airline industry, $4 billion for the air cargo industry, and $17 billion for those companies that maintain our national security. There are a number of restrictions regarding stock buybacks and executive compensations. I won't get into those, but these are loans to these industries, not bailouts, so they'll have to pay these back over time as well. Ken? And then this is kind of the area that I'll spend the most of my time is on the how small businesses, self-employed, and nonprofits are eligible and can benefit. There's a lot going on. Let me just go ahead and start with this right now. There is a lot of speculation, comments, frustration on the part of everybody, us included. What I encourage and hope is that you will be patient with these lenders. Lenders are coming online every day, being authorized or being determined qualified lenders through the SBA so that they can try to help get this money out. But this is an effort to help small businesses get some short-term loan and loans to kind of help get them through this period, certainly over the next 8 weeks or so. But the Paycheck Protection Program is really where Congress really intended for small businesses and nonprofits, those 501c3 type of nonprofits, and also 501c19, which had to do with some of the veterans organizations as well. But this is the largest section of the CARES Act, and it's probably the most important with regards to the stimulus bill for small businesses. This program sets aside nearly $350 billion in loans for small businesses. as sole proprietors, self-employed, independent contractors, 1099s, freelancers, gig economy workers, any of those folks, this is what that program is set up for. Businesses can get two and a half times their amount of average monthly payroll, plus an additional 25% on top of that, up to the amount of $10 million. Payroll is calculated by adding up all compensation for each of your employees, salary, wages, tips, including paid vacation, paid leave, health benefits, and more with respect to those employees. From that total amount, then you subtract out your payroll taxes, income taxes, and any amount of money over $100,000. The cap is $100,000 for an employee. So any employee you have making over $100,000, you're only calculating up to that $100,000 mark and not going beyond that. And then after you're subtracting those taxes out, then that's your remaining sum of your payroll cost. Lenders can defer the fees, principal, and interest for these loans up to a year, but no more than a year, at a rate of 1%, and the loan has to be paid back over a 2-year period. The loans must be used, they're a little bit more restrictive than the EIDL loans, but these loans must be used for covering your payroll costs. That's kind of the biggest part of this and reason. It can be used for paying your interest on your mortgage, utilities, and your rent. Loans will be issued by local and national lenders. The SBA came out last Thursday night with a kind of a find your lender link on their website. So that if you just go in there, you can type in your zip code and it will come up with the lenders in your immediate area that are qualified lenders for this program. As I mentioned a moment ago, there are more lenders coming online daily, so that if there are 6 or 7 in your immediate zip code area that are eligible today, tomorrow or by the end of the week, there may be twice as many. They're trying to get as many of these banks online and operational and able to provide these loans as they can. There are really minimal requirements. There's no personal guarantee or collateral required, and loans turn into grants equal to the amount spent on payroll, rent, and your interest on your mortgage and utilities for the 8 weeks after the origination of the loan, not after the application was filled out, but after it was granted and issued. So in essence, as long as an employer continues paying their employees at a normal level over the next 8 weeks, and for those other things, as I said, mortgage on interest, utilities, and so forth, then your loan will be forgiven entirely. Now, loan forgiveness is reduced proportionally, though, if an employer reduces the number of full-time employees or reduces their wages by more than 25%. So, for example, if you're an employer and you laid off workers over the last couple of weeks, really anytime after February the 15th, you have until April the 26th, or actually June the 30th is when this program ends. You have until then to bring them back. So if you have, the period between laying off people between February the 15th and April the 26th, which we haven't yet. So if you laid off somebody today or tomorrow, to avoid any reduction in your forgiveness, you would have to bring those people back and start paying them back at their normal rate, or at the very least, 75% of their full rate, because again, you can't go below 25% of the rate. You can have your loan forgiven if it's done by June the 30th. The last thing I'll kind of mention on here is the full principal of the PPP loan is forgiven as long as the borrower, and the borrower is not responsible for any interest accrued over that 8-week period. It's all forgiven. But if any of the amount of the loan is not paid back afterwards, then you're required to pay back that interest on the loan, subject to the terms you agree to with your lender. Ken, go ahead. This next slide is just an example of one of the many resources that we've come up with. This one we came out with probably about 3 weeks ago. It's called our Coronavirus Emergency Loan Small Business Guide and Checklist. You can find it at uschamber.com/SB loans. or you can just simply go to the uschamber.com/coronavirus, and you can find all of our resources. We also have two other resources very similar to this, looks the exact same, but they're one-pagers. On the employer retention tax credit, there's a flyer on it, and then there's one for the SBA's economic injury disaster loans, which I'll talk about next in just a second as well. But you can find all of our resources at uschamber.com/coronavirus for you to use within your businesses, for the chamber to use with their members, and anyone else. We encourage you to use all that, and we're trying to keep it as updated as we can, as new changes are coming out daily and sometimes almost hourly from the SBA on some of this stuff as well. So, Ken? Thanks. Now, this is, as I mentioned a little while ago, Congress set aside about $350 billion for the Paycheck Protection Programs. That is where they intended most small businesses to go to, and independent contractors and others, everybody that would be eligible for these loans. That is really where they were trying to send people to go to. Now, the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan is probably not a new loan program to y'all. In fact, it's been around about 60 years. So if you've been a community affected by a hurricane, which I know you guys have, tornadoes like we had up in the, through this area last night, and have continued on towards the East Coast throughout the day. If you've been impacted by one of these natural occurrences like hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever, you now qualify. This legislation expanded this natural disasters to include the coronavirus pandemic. This is where there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of frustration, because SBA seems to be coming out with changes almost daily with some of their folks. And again, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. Please don't misunderstand me. I encourage a great deal of patience and grace with them. Keep in mind, this legislation only appropriated about $10 billion for this, as opposed to the $350 billion in the PPP loan. This was kind of just a set aside for additional monies for some businesses that might not otherwise qualify for the PPP loans. To get one of these loans, you have to be a small business, fewer than 500 employees. As I said, nonprofits are eligible. Really, the same nonprofits that are eligible for the PPP loans are eligible for these loans. Independent contractors, self-employed, and so forth. Originally, the legislation was drafted so that you could, as a borrower, you could apply for and be granted as much as a $2 million working capital loan that would be paid out over a 30-year period at a rate of 3.75 if you're a business and 2.75 if you're a nonprofit. We learned last Thursday night that the SBA has had so much demand on this that they are capping the loan amount to $15,000 plus the eligibility of an up to $10,000 grant, which this was the grant that, in addition to, they had set up as not as a loan, but as a grant. Even if you had not qualified for the loan, you would be eligible for the grant potentially. Initially, the legislation said that a borrower could seek up to $10,000 of emergency grant that would not have to be paid back at all, even if the loan was not awarded. We had learned during the week last week that there had been changes made, some misunderstanding or misinterpretation, and some new rules. And so what they said in the end was a small business with up to 10 employees could qualify for $10,000. But for example, if you were a business and had 5 employees, you would qualify for a $5,000 loan. If you were in a business with 13 employees, then you would only be capped at $10,000. So it was a maximum amount of up to $10,000, not just a flat $10,000 grant as it was initially proposed to be. And they had said that it would be issued within 3 days after it was done. They also clarified that, saying that they were going to try to get those out 3 days after the loan was approved or the grant was approved, not after the application of the loan. So there's been a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding with regards to these loans. Again, this is not necessarily the SBA's problem. This was just a massive overwhelming of the system, which was not necessarily intended to be a same type of system as the Paycheck Protection Program was set up to be. These loans are only applied through the SBA, through the SBA.gov website. So don't go to your lender looking for the EIDL loans. And I will say this, if you're a business and you receive both an EIDL loan and a Paycheck protection loan, you're eligible to get both. You are also eligible to roll them into one loan as well. The only thing is if you keep them as two separate loans, there is a stipulation. You're not allowed to use the monies or from the EIDL loan in the same way in which you would use the monies you get from a Paycheck protection loan. Again, those loans were only, or the Paycheck protection loans are only for payroll, rent, utilities, and interest on your mortgage. The EIDL loans are for the same things, except it goes beyond
Laura,
that.
we lost your mic.
Oh, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me, Ken?
I can hear you more.
I can hear him.
Yeah,
Okay,
he must have lost his microphone.
okay,
I can hear him.
okay. Oh, it says you are muted by host.
Still don't have it. Hold on.
Way to go, Ken. Just mute me. Just kidding.
I
Can you
can hear you more.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll keep going. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So anyway, so the last thing I was just saying though, I want to, because we get this question often. So if I'm a business and I get both loans, what can I use those for? So what I just want to make clear again is if you were to get both, you have to use the Paycheck protection loan on those four things I mentioned a moment ago. Interest on your mortgage, rent, payroll, and utilities. You can use an EIDL loan for those same things, except if you have both, you cannot use those for the same thing. So let's just say, for example, you're using your Paycheck protection loan for payroll. Perfect. You have to use the EIDL loan for something other than payroll. You can't use it for the exact same things. I probably muddied the water there. If I did, I apologize. And I'm happy to come back to that if necessary. Ken, if you can hear me, I'll let you go ahead and flip. Perfect. Thank you, sir. The last two slides I'll talk about, and this is just the paid leave. The bill modified the Paycheck or paid sick and paid family medical leave. It went into effect last Wednesday, April the 1st, and all leave has to be COVID-19 specific. All provisions expire on December the 31st of this year, so none of these are permanent cases, and it's 100% tax refundable. So it's also important to know that if you're a self-employed independent contractor, you're eligible for both paid sick leave and family medical leave tax credits if you were otherwise eligible and able to work for somebody else who provided those loans or those benefits. Now, employers with less than 500 employees, this is who's eligible or the paid sick leave. Employers with less than 500 employees are required to provide 10 days of paid sick leave if the leave is, again, related to COVID-19 specifically. Sick leave can be taken when ill or quarantined or told by a medical personnel to stay home, or if they've got a sick family member who's home, or even if a child is at home because their school and daycare are shut down. Now, if you're requesting sick leave for yourself because of your being sick, then you would be paid your full rate of pay up to a maximum amount of $511 each day. If you were only at home taking care of someone else who is sick, and like your child or something, then you're only eligible for 2/3 of your regular pay, or up to a maximum of $200 a day to take care of somebody else. Those payments up to the maximum amount will be reimbursed by the federal government. Leave is in addition to any other leave that your employer already provides. Businesses with fewer than 50 employees may be exempt from providing leave to take care of someone else or a child who's at home because their school is closed, if by doing so threatens the viability of the business by doing so. And then paid sick leave is not available for employees who can telework. The last slide, Ken, and this is really the same thing having to do with family medical leave. Again, businesses with fewer than 500 employees are required to provide up to 10 weeks of paid leave if an employee needs to take care of a child who's at home, or their office is or the school has shut down and they're taking care of somebody else. Leave again is paid at 2/3 the regular rate, up to a maximum of $200 a day, or to an aggregate of $10,000. It's the paid family leave is in addition to leave that's already provided by the employer. It is reimbursed by the federal government up to that maximum amount. And again, same exemption for businesses with fewer than 500 or 50 employees. They are exempt from providing that leave if by doing so would prevent the viability of the business staying open as well. And then again, paid leave is not available to employees who can telework as well. And so, Ken, that is it. That is kind of my prepared slides and remarks. These, again, are just a couple of resources. Again, uschamber.com/coronavirus. And for small businesses, I really kind of encourage you to go to uschamber.com/co. You can find all the resources I've mentioned and more on that website as well. But this is also a great resource for you as small businesses to, what are other small businesses doing, not only to combat or to protect their employees and themselves from the coronavirus, but in business in general. Well before we ever knew what coronavirus was, and we'll be there for a while after the coronavirus is kind of a distant memory. This site is a great resource for small businesses to learn how to do business better and how to and what other businesses are doing around the country and stuff. So Nancy, Ken, thank you again very much for the invitation, opportunity to join you today. I apologize if I confused anybody with anything. There is a lot of confusion still out there. Again, as I tell people, don't take a Washington lobbyist or lobbyist to tell you exactly how to operate your business and what loan you should go after. What I strongly encourage you to do is work with your lender. I encourage you to go to the lender that you have a relationship with already. Those are their clients that they already have are the ones they're working with more right now. And we'll open it up for more non-clients, I guess, later, probably is kind of what we're hearing from most. And if there's some tax provisions that you want to look into, I'd encourage you to talk to your tax professional as well about those. We certainly can't give you advice on which loan to go after, how to do it, and what your legal advice should be. So don't ever think that, but I can just tell you what the legislation says or was intended to say it from the beginning and go from there. But anyway, I do appreciate it. Thanks again for what you're doing, Nancy, and for the members of yours down in Daytona Beach and that community. We appreciate you. We appreciate your friendship, your partnership, and all you do for us. So thank you.
More appreciate that. We had some questions coming in through the chat, so let's go bang through a few of these and see if we can get some information. One was asking if anyone knew when the UI was going to start. Everybody they've talked to has gotten no word back on this, and I've heard a lot of that too, where applications are in and there's just not been word coming back on funding.
That's interesting. It is up to the states to, like on the $600 additional. That has to be done through an agreement with the federal government and the state's unemployment agencies, whatever the agency's called there in Florida. I was on a call about a week or a week and a half ago, and one of your state representatives, Nancy would know who it is in the state legislature. He's a chamber executive as well. And he was saying that those offices are overrun right now, but they're keeping somewhat relative normal business hours, but they have expanded to working on the weekends. And so he encouraged people to, as they're filing that type of information, to maybe file it over the weekend when there maybe is less volume on the staff that's working the weekends and stuff. So that's just a recommendation based upon one of your state legislators on how to go about filing for your unemployment. And I would also say this, my wife is on unemployment right now. She works for a small business, a small dentist office. And fortunately for her, her employer, the office manager, filed unemployment for all the employees at one time. So instead of leaving it to each individual employee to file their own unemployment, if you can help them by filing it for them all at one time, I think the unemployment group agency there in Florida would welcome one person doing it for all those people, as opposed to all those people doing it individually and stuff as well. So just maybe a suggestion or recommendation.
And can I add a comment there?
Absolutely.
Thanks. So Yeah, you were probably speaking about Representative Broder, and that's who I assume you were talking about. But the state system has been quite overwhelmed with the amount of online applications. They opened up a new mobile site last week, and they also are now allowing paper applications. And our Career Source office has those paper applications available that you can go in, and they can even assist you with filling out the applications. We also, I believe, can have it on our site where people can
That's
download
correct.
that application. So if you want to see it prior to going online to fill it out, it helps you kind of know what kind of information you'll need. There's also FedEx is mailing them. There's a FedEx on ISB that has the applications. We'll actually mail it for you, and they're doing that daily. So just keep in mind that if you're not getting through with the internet and all of the online resources, you can now file a paper application.
That's
Very
good.
Thanks, Nancy. Question on the PPP 8-week period. When does it begin? On approval or when the funds are actually in your account?
I would say they just, the legislation says after origination. So to me, that seems like it would be once the approval is done. Well, I would say once you get your funds. So, but as you're talking to your lender, I would just clarify that the clock starts ticking on the day that it's deposited, or the check is out the door from your end.
Okay. Let's get to some other questions here. What about the payroll prior to the PPP loan? Can you use idle dollars for that payroll?
Can ask that question again. Payroll on the idle, what were you saying?
They was asking about, it says, what about the payroll prior to the PPP loan? Can you use idle funds for that payroll?
I got you. So if you're saying, the way I understand is like you got an idle loan first, and then you got a Paycheck Protection loan second. Is that correct?
I believe that's how it's asked, yes.
You can do one of two things. You have to use those. So if you started using the idle loan for your payroll, then I would suggest that your Paycheck Protection loan be used for, again, the more interest on your mortgage, your utilities, and rent, although that might be a lot less than your payroll. So what you may want to consider then, and this would be a conversation for your lender as well, is merging the two loans together and doing it that way. Now, keep in mind, let's just say, for example, that business that's asking the question, or any of this may be on the line with a similar question. Let's just say you got let's say you got the capped amount at $15,000 for an idle loan plus $10,000 in grant, because you say you've got 10 employees or 20 employees, but you were capped at 10,000 there. So that's a total of $25,000. One's a loan, and the other, and that's the 15, and then the 10,000 is a grant. Now, if you were to get a Paycheck Protection loan and merge the two, they would take that full $25,000 and incorporate that into the Paycheck Protection loan, making it one big loan. But that grant now has turned into part of the loan. It's not a forgiven amount or a grant that doesn't have to be paid back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think Michelle kind of clarified a little bit. She's saying that the PPP only pays for 8 weeks of payroll. Can
That's
you
correct.
use idle funds for other payroll outside of that window? And if I understood your answer correctly, that would be the case, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so. Yes, the idle loan is for 8 weeks. I take it back. The Paycheck Protection is set up for an 8-week thing. Idle, that's a great question, Ken, because I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to put myself in her shoes. So I pay my payroll with idle, get the Paycheck Protection, but that runs out in 8 weeks, or I have to pay it back in 8 weeks to have it forgiven, but I still have monies left in my idle. On the surface, I would say you could. That's how you would do that. But I would encourage her just to kind of get clarification, because I'd hate to say yes, you could use that for payroll, maybe do it temporarily, then use it for Paycheck Protection, and then maybe roll it back with whatever funds are left in idle. I would encourage you to talk to your lender, and it may be more important just so that you don't have any kind of implications after the fact. It might be better to roll it all into one, but I would encourage you to talk to your lender about that. just to stay safe.
Agreed. And I would encourage everybody with any of these questions to talk to your lender, talk to your attorney, talk to your accountant, and get their expert advice. Let's see if we can get a couple more in. Are you good on time, or we've got a couple more minutes maybe to get some questions in?
Yeah, I've got about 5 more minutes. I've got another call
Okay.
at 3 o'clock. I'm about to jump on and get looped onto and all that stuff.
Okay, we'll get through as many as we can in those 5 minutes then. What criteria do we use to count employees for paid sick leave? Are full-time and part-time employees counted at the same rate?
That is a great question, and one of those that's been massively confusing because the legislation says, in fact, looking at this, if you look at who's eligible or calculating your payroll cost, it says the sum of payments and compensation with respect to employees. It doesn't specify full-time or part-time. There have been those that have questioned with part-time, would you take 2 part-times and equal the amount of 1 full-time employee when you're calculating your payroll cost? That one, it seems like it'd be a straightforward one. I've heard people, folks say that yes, you do count them almost as part-time as almost if they were full-time. And then I've heard them also say, and I've seen things written where it says part-timers are not included in calculating your payroll costs. So that's one I would definitely encourage you to talk to your lender about, just to make sure that you're calculating it correctly. I'll use an example. I have a relative in Texas who was granted a payroll protection loan. He's in the Houston area, decided to apply, not with a bank in the Houston area, knowing there'd be a massive overrun from small businesses in that metropolitan area. So he went to a community bank out in West Texas and got the loan agreed there. And it took a number of days after receiving approval. In fact, he was approved a week ago yesterday, and as of Thursday night of last week, still had not gotten a check yet, but he had gotten approval on that Sunday before. He had, and I'd asked him about the question. He has like 2 part-time employees, and he said he did calculate them in. Now he has a couple of companies with a total of about 50 employees total, and half of them make over $100,000 as well. So he had to kind of take different hits on that cap, but he did count those bodies, I guess, in essence, those part-time employees when calculating the rest of his thing as well.
All right, one final question. Can startups apply for the EIDL grant? They have part-time employees.
I would say, I would encourage you to talk to your lender about it. I think you can, because if you were in business before February the 15th, I believe is kind of the cutoff. If you were in business by then, you can apply for a Paycheck protection loan.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, Moore, thank you so much for taking some time. We're sure that things are as crazy in Washington, D.C. as they are up here. So for you to take some time to share your thoughts and help illuminate even just a little bit for folks, we greatly appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, Ken. And I do apologize. This was, it's interesting, as I've told people, that probably the best analogy I've heard of this is, because there's a lot of frustration. I just encourage a great deal of patience and strength in this, but with the lenders and the SBA and everybody else as well, because just imagine they are overrun and overwhelmed right now, and bringing more staff on to try to process these loans as quickly as possible, as I understand. I was on a call earlier today at noon that said that very thing. The best example I can kind of give you, this is like building a plane as it's taking off on the runway. They appropriated a lot of money, all with the purposes of getting it into the hands of small businesses so that they could stay open, pay their employees, and so forth during this time. But the rules and stuff are still coming out as we speak today, and so that's the kind of meaning they're still building as it's flying. So be patient. I will say this, this will be the last thing I say, and I'll let you guys go and so forth as well. But they appropriated nearly $350 billion for the Paycheck protection loan in the package initially. Last week, as you may recall, they tried to pass by unanimous consent, meaning no one could consent to an additional $250 billion for the Paycheck protection loan, not the EIDL loan, but the Paycheck protection loan. They weren't able to get that. As we understand, negotiations have been ongoing all weekend long between staffs and Senate and House leadership. I feel like they'll try to bring that back up sometime this week, maybe, and try to pass something. We were supportive of a clean package, just that. Now, we have been encouraging legislation to include C6s in the next package. That will largely address the needs of local chambers and trade associations. And we have sent letters. Other members of Congress are sending their own letters in support of including those. So I think that might be a part of another package later. Congress is already talking about a phase 4 package. What all will be included in that? We hope that C6s will be included in that. We do think in the meantime that they will appropriate some more money for the Paycheck Protection Loan. So while there's a lot of concern, well, the money's going to be run out and we're not going to have enough by the end of this week or next week, I think Congress will address that. And so we'll see. But I feel confident there's still money there. It's just a matter of getting the loans that are in the pipeline now through and opening it up for more loans to be done. And if you think about it this way, last Friday is when independent contractors and sole proprietors could start applying. And as someone said a little while ago, with my simple math skills, if you took the maximum amount of, say, $100,000 for an employee, and you divide that by 12 months, and then did 2.5 times that, for 2.5 months, their pay would be about $28,000 would be the loan. So if you think about this, all the loans that are coming in to those lending agencies now and the SBA are largely those independent contractors, and they're smaller loans. They're not the $1 million loans for their businesses and stuff. If they're sole proprietors, they're smaller amounts. And so that's going to take a little bit of time because there are going to be a lot of those and stuff as well. So that's a lot to say at the very end of a call. But my whole point is I think Congress will appropriate more. I think Congress will include C6s maybe in the next package for chambers and nonprofit or those nonprofits and others. Beyond that, I have no idea, but we'll see. But we will keep you guys as up to date as we can, Nancy, so that you can share that with your folks and keep them abreast the best we can. If you have other questions, don't hesitate to let me know or give me a call, and we're happy to do whatever we can for you guys and stuff. But we just appreciate it very much. Thanks.
Maura, I appreciate that. Folks, if you have additional questions or didn't get asked in the session, as Maura mentioned, feel free to email them to me, ken@daytonachamber.com. We'll facilitate those to Maura and his team and work on getting answers back to you. I encourage you to check out our chamber webpage, our COVID-19 resource page, navigate to it right from the banner at the top of our homepage. And I encourage you to follow us on our social medias. We share as much information as we get. That's probably the most immediate platform. So with that, thank you all for joining us. Maura, thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll be in touch as the information changes, and it changes quickly.
Very good. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.